Now, okay, we already know how to solve from the magnitude and the direction of the vector. We can now plot it. So pwede mong i-drawing. Second, we can now determine the components. And therefore, straightforward na lang hanapin yung unit vector form niya. Just write your I hat and J hat there. Now, what if the problem is reversed? For example, given the magnitude, given the unit vector form of the vector, how would we determine the magnitude and the direction of that vector? Okay, yung magnitude madali kasi madali lang hanapin yung magnitude. What you only need to do is use your Pythagorean theorem. For example, here, the magnitude of A is just the square root of the sum of the squares of the x and y components of A. Diba? That's just what you need to do in the magnitude. Okay? Clear to? Clear ito? Paano nakuha to? Again, your AX and the AY and A form right triangle where the AX and AY, the components, I mean the vectors that has length which is equal to the components, ito again yung definition on, as the legs, and then the hypotenuse is your A. So parang ganito itsura niya. Vector, ganito yung vector A, di ba? Ito yung AX, ito yung AY. So this is a right triangle. Therefore, the length of AX and the length of AY, you need your Pythagorean theorem to solve for the length of A, which is the magnitude of vector A. Okay? Questions? Question dito sa magnitude? Wala tayong issue dapat sa magnitude. Ngayon, ang issue ay nasa direction. Kasi medyo minsan problematic yung calculator na ginagamit nyo. Okay. So for the angle or the other hand, or the direction of the angle, there's some ambiguity. Kasi halimbawa, and usually ang gagawin mo lang is you find the arctangent. So given, halimbawa, so you know that AY and AX are related by some tangent. So tangent theta equals AY over, dito. Tangent theta equals AY over AX. Tama? So wala tayong issue dyan if the vector is in the first quadrant. Pero once that it's now in the second, third, or fourth quadrant, doon na nagkakaroon ng ambiguity sa direction of theta. Remember, the inverse tangent function is a multivalued function. So usually ginagawa sa math yan, di ba? Nire-restrict siya kung anong range lang ng tangent, ng inverse tangent function. So to remove the ambiguity, ang gagawin natin is we will go back to the vector and then check the direction of that vector. Paano? So first, we ignore first the signs of the components. So of course, the vector can have positive x component and negative y component, or kung ano man combination ng positive and negative ng mga components. So for the meantime, wag mo muna isipin yung mga components sa'yo, yung mga signs sa'yo. Treat all the components as positive, or only check the magnitudes of these components. So positive lang yan. And then calculate the related acute angle phi, where phi here is arctangent of the absolute value of AY over AX. So ibig sabihin, you treat all the components as positive, get the inverse tangent function, you get a related acute angle. Ano yung related acute angle na yon? Yung related acute angle, yung angle with respect to the x-axis. So for example, in quadrant 1, the related angle is just our usual angle with respect to positive x-axis. Nakikita itong diagram? Nakikita itong diagram? Okay? Do you see this? Okay, yes, clear? Okay, clear. Thank you. So, what about in quadrant 2? For example, for a vector pointing in quadrant 2, ganyan yung itsura niyan. So the related acute angle is this angle here with respect to the negative x-axis. Okay? For quadrant 3, ganun din. The angle with respect to the negative x-axis. And for quadrant 4, the angle with respect to, again, positive x-axis. So you expect that the related acute angle is only from 0 to 90 degrees. So, ganun lang dapat yung sign niyan. Okay? This is from 0 to 90 degrees. So, ngayon, pero remember, these angles here, especially quadrant 2 and quadrant 3 vectors, they are with respect to the negative x-axis and not with respect to the positive axis, or our so-called principal angle. Ang gusto mong hanapin ay yung principal angle. Pero, by just using your geometry, you can determine the principal angle from the related acute angle. Diba? So, paano? or you can determine the angle with respect to positive x from the related acute angle. So paano? Eh di yung gawin mo, for example, in quadrant 2, ano yan? Ano yung angle? Ang gusto mo for quadrant 2 is this angle here. Tama? How would you determine that angle? For quadrant 1, it's obvious. The related acute angle is just equal to the principal angle. Parehas lang yan. Kasi nasa quadrant 1, wala tayong issue dyan. Pero sa quadrant 2, hindi. Kasi for example, what you want in this angle is from the positive x-axis towards this vector. So ano yan? So in that case, theta here and phi here are what? Ano sila?
Supplementary angles.
Yes, correct. They are supplementary angles. And hence, to determine your theta, you use 180 degrees minus phi. Okay? What about in quadrant 3? What about in quadrant 3? In quadrant 3, ano mangyayari? You start with this, papunta ka dito. So, lumagpas na siya ng 180 degrees. So anong gagawin mo? You add what? Anong mangyayari? Anong mangyayari?
Subtract 180 po from...
Subtract 180 ba?
Add 180 po.
Yes, correct. You add 180. So, theta is 180 degrees plus phi. And then for quadrant 4, there are two ways to do quadrant 4, but the easiest is just negate. Kasi pwede mong isipin na negative angle lang yan. Okay? Theta is negative phi. Questions? May tanong ba? May tanong ba? Dito? This will be an important idea when you solve problems na from magnitude, from unit vector, how would you determine the magnitude and direction of that vector? Okay. Now, of course, the next question is, how would you determine the quadrant of a vector? Yun pala dapat yung sinabi ko, no? Hinuli ko to. Dapat nauna to. For example, ang vector na nasa quadrant 1, the x and y components should be both positive. So, ang vector na nasa quadrant 2, the x component is negative, the y component is positive. So, ang vector na nasa quadrant 3, there are both negative. Ang vector na nasa quadrant 4, positive ang x component, negative ang y component. It's like your usual coordinates. For quadrant 1, all are positive. For quadrant 2, negative ang abscissa, positive ang ordinate. For quadrant 3, parehas negative yung abscissa at ordinate mo. For quadrant 4, positive ang abscissa, negative ang ordinate. Ay, naalala nyo pa yan ha, yung abscissa at ordinate nyo? Naalala nyo pa yun? Yeah, it's very old. Okay, questions. Are there any questions here? May tanong ba rito? This is important. Para wag kayong mag-plug in lang ng arctangent na may negatives kasi malilito kayo yan sa negatives na yan. Hindi lumalabas ng tama yung sagot dyan. Okay? Questions? Are there any questions in this item? In this exam slide? May tanong ba? Wala? Okay.